Welcome back, everybody. It is the first Friday of the month, which means it's time to catch up with our editor-at-large, John Kingston, for the employment report for the truck transportation industry. John, thanks for being on with us this morning. What do the latest numbers show us?
Well, the latest numbers are sort of significant because they are the first monthly downturn since April 2020. As you can imagine, April 2020 had a massive decline, and every other month since then, after some revisions, has shown an upward gain in truck transportation jobs. That is no longer the case. The number was down 4,900 jobs in March compared to February. Let me note that February was revised upward pretty significantly. So the fact is that we are now still over where January was. So January to February went up a lot more than we thought. And February to March right now shows a decline of about 4,900 jobs. So remember, these numbers do not include independent owner operators who might be taking the brunt of the freight downturn that, of course, we've written about now at Freightways numerous times. And when I was at MATS last week and the Truckload Carriers Association prior to that, I certainly heard plenty of comment about that. This could mark a break. It could be 1 month that turns around next month. Warehouse jobs were up considerably. Let me get the numbers on that. Hang on a second. They were up 4,300. All these numbers on a seasonally adjusted basis. And the revision of February was enormous. So right now, from January, we're up 30,900 warehouse jobs, and we are up in truck transportation. These are not all driver jobs. We're up in truck transportation jobs as well. So kind of the first break of a streak that was basically going on for almost 2 years.
And John, can you talk to some of that aspect when you're looking at the growth and the warehousing as well? Because it seems like throughout the pandemic, there was so much attention being put on, hey, we need to get more drivers. But there's so many other parts of the supply chain that really needs a lot more people. Can you talk to the importance of more folks in the warehouses, or even, of course, more warehouses? So maybe that feeds into construction as well. So definitely seems like there are other streams of the supply chain that really need a lot of help.
Yeah, let's talk about the way they revised numbers. So when they came out with March today, so they come out with March. A month from now, there'll be a new March figure. It's subject to revision. And a month from that, there'll be another March figure, that again, also subject to revision. And after that, it is final. However, annually, they do a sort of, or at least is subject to a more significant revision as more information comes out about kind of like the base number that they work from. When they came out with that number in February, reflecting January numbers, so this would have been after the revision, the number of warehouse workers in that January figure had been revised up by an enormous amount. I mean, tens of thousands of jobs. And it was at that point that the number of warehouse workers were higher than the number of truck transportation workers. That was the first time ever. Now, again, that doesn't include independent contractors. There are not too many independent warehouse workers, but there are certainly independent truck drivers that wouldn't be captured in the number. But that was kind of a significant change, or a significant moment when the warehouse workers started exceeding the truck transportation workers. So, and we've gone up again. I mean, warehouse numbers are up and truck transportation numbers are down. I just want to go back on the truck transportation numbers, the not seasonally adjusted numbers, they also were down.
John, I've got to speculate a little bit, right? We're talking kind of about the threat for a freight recession or a really big freight downturn. Some people are likening it to 2019, to kind of this bloodbath that might be coming, according to our CEO and founder, Craig Fuller. And I can't help but wonder if people now are starting to get a hint of this and kind of seeking out those jobs that will feel a little bit more stable. We've got a ton of inventory still coming into the United States. People are looking for places to put that inventory, and now for people to handle that inventory, which makes a warehouse job look a little bit more stable in threat of the coming economy. It also kind of makes it very useful right now as well, right? Do you think that could be a driving factor?
Maybe. Look, layoffs in warehouse jobs are pretty rare, as I think we know. Well, it's just ever upward, and it probably is one of the safest jobs in America. I think actually diesel mechanic is probably the safest job in America today. Anyway, so yeah, I think there's the possibility. Anthony, right? As you know, when you cover markets, they talk about flight to safety. You buy T-bills, you buy gold. Maybe a warehouse job is flight to safety.
There's definitely going to be a lot of safety in some parts of the supply chain, but like you said, some of those trucking aspects definitely going to get hit hard. When we're looking at other parts of the market, and you are a market expert yourself, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you something about what's going on within the oil market as well.
Well, this was a historic week. The release of 1 million barrels a day by the Biden administration for over the next 6 months dwarfs any kind of release that the SPR has ever undertaken. My view is that this is what the SPR was put together for. Actually, when it was created back in the 70s, the talk back then was that you needed an SPR because there might be a shutoff of oil coming through the Strait of Hormuz. That's the export point for Iranian oil, Iraqi oil, Saudi oil, Kuwaiti oil. That's never happened in the kind of 50 years since the SPR was created. The 50s, yeah, 50 years. But instead, you've got 3 million barrels a day of Russian oil off the market. Now, why do I use the 3 million barrels a day figure? Because that is what the International Energy Agency estimates is going to be the amount of Russian oil that is going to need to be shut in as a result of sanctions, either formal sanctions like the U.S. ban on Russian imports, or what would be known as self-sanctions, where companies just say, I don't want to deal with this stuff. So if we take that 3 million barrels a day as gospel, that's 3% of world supply, because the market is right about probably a little under 100 million barrels a day. You lose 3% in one shot, that is by any definition a supply shock. And we have this oil sitting there for this. And I've seen a little bit online about concern about, well, we're going to run it down so low. Okay, we're going to run it down low, but this is what you have it for. This is why you pay insurance. To me, this is a perfect time to use it. And so 1 million barrels a day, I saw some estimates about, well, it's only X% of U.S. consumption. That's not the figure that matters. The figure that matters is if we are going to lose 3 million barrels a day of supply, how do we claw it back? And really, if you're 1 million barrels a day of SPR oil, that's 1/3 of it right there. That is nothing to scoff at. Excuse me. There are other ways of getting there. I think we talked on the show last week about maybe more Venezuelan oil, maybe more Iranian oil, and certainly demand destruction as high prices discourage consumption. You got to get there. You got to close that 3 million barrels a day. And because the market will always balance, the market at least will move toward balancing. And if it moves through demand destruction, that's really, really ugly, because that means higher prices. If you can soften that amount that has to be met by demand destruction by putting oil from the SPR onto the market, I think that's sound policy.
So that oil from the SPR, just for folks who potentially don't understand what this means for the American not the American consumer, but the American oil market. Where does that oil go? That 1/3 of the Russian supply that we were seeing before, where does that go? Who's allowed to now use this reserve that's released?
Well, I haven't read the details, but I mean, in the past, like when a hurricane hit and they would sell oil from the SPR, they would have weekly auctions. And sometimes companies didn't bid at all. They put oil onto the market and nobody bid, which to me is fine. It means that companies are okay. I don't know whether they're going to do daily auctions or a weekly auction for 7 days worth. The details remain sketchy. I'm going to have to look into that. I'm sure my former colleagues at Platts will be covering that extensively. But you could have an auction of SPR oil and nobody bids. That doesn't mean that it's worthless. It means that right now you're okay with supply and nobody needs to go out and buy it. So, we're going to look. Early in my career when I was covering metals, I used to call the General Services Administration every day to find out if they had sold any tin, because they had this gigantic stockpile of tin that they built up based on the idea that they might have to fight another world war like World War II. And then at a point they realized, we're not going to need all this tin. And tin wasn't the only metal, okay? And I used to call them up because they used to offer it onto the market every day. And I don't know whether they're going to offer oil onto the market every day. We'll see. It's going to be it's going to be something closely watched, however frequent the auction is. So they've sold oil onto the market before, and they'll sell oil again, but they never sold this much, and they didn't sell it for that as long either. 6 months. That's a long time.
Right. And John, we know that you host a podcast here with us on FreightWaves Drilling Deep. Comes out on Fridays as well. What have you got on tap for the podcast this week?
Well, it's out. I mean, it's already out on freightwaves.com. And first of all, in the beginning of it, I say what I just said to you about the SPR. And then the guest of the week is Tracy Rossner of Transplace. Of course, Transplace was bought by Uber Freight last year. And they mostly serve shippers. And so he's got a kind of a bird's eye view of how the supply chain is doing. So we talk about how the supply chain is doing. Is it getting any better? And what might have been done to prevent all the squeezes we've had in the supply chain before they actually happen. So it's a good chat. He used to be the head of, I forget his title now, but one of the top logistics people at Walmart, so one of the biggest shippers in the country. So he's got great experience and great perspective.
All right, John, thank you for being on with us this morning. You can head wherever you get your podcasts, your Freightcast, Apple, Spotify, whatever, to get that Drilling Deep podcast. And we'll talk to you next week.
And well, Kaylee, I'm going to be in San Diego like you are. I guess I'm going to be doing this at 6 a.m. right?
There you go. Yep, I'll see you 6 a.m. bright and early too.
All right, take care.
All right, see you next week, John.